Chris Hipkins.
Thank you very much, Mr Chair, and I welcome this opportunity to contribute to the debate on Part 4. The part of the bill that I would like to speak about is different to the part that members have thus far been talking about, and I'd like to talk about the appointment and powers of inspectors, because this is something that comes up a lot in the businesses that I have been visiting and talking about health and safety, and they've certainly been turning their attention to these issues. And the issue that small business and small and medium-sized businesses are raising is the balance of power, I guess, or getting the balance right with regard to inspectors between a punitive enforcement approach and a sort of an enabling, supportive advice type approach. And so what a lot of people are raising with us is that they want to be compliant, they want to adhere to the law, they want to do the right thing, and what they actually want is some support to enable them to meet all of the obligations under the Act. And they actually see a positive role for inspectors in coming in, pointing out the areas where they need to improve, and actually taking a proactive and enabling and supporting role, whereas certainly if you read this section of the bill around who the inspectors might be and what their powers might be, it certainly suggests quite a punitive approach to the role of an inspector, when actually if we want to talk about the culture change that the Minister spoke about in the earlier parts of the debate, surely the role of the inspectors can also be a positive one. There is no doubt whatsoever that these punitive measures that are here are important, and that in fact we want to ensure that the inspectors have the powers that are listed here, but we also want to ensure that they have the ability to play a more constructive role in providing businesses and any organisation in fact with advice on how they can do better and where they can do better. And so I just wonder whether the government has given sufficient attention to getting that balance right, or do they simply see the inspectors as being that kind of last-ditch, here's all the things you're doing wrong, taking the prosecutions and whatever, rather than the helping to affect the culture change. Now, under Clause 181(1)(b), I note that the regulator may basically appoint in writing as an inspector any employee of the state services. And I wonder if the Minister could elaborate for us examples on some practical examples on where he thinks that kind of power might be used. And the area that I'm really interested in is around education, because a lot of schools are grappling with their obligations under this legislation. And at the moment, the primary inspectors of schooling and early childhood education as well is the Education Review Office. So would, for example, the government envisage the inspectors or the people conducting Education Review Office visits to educational establishments, would the government envisage that they may also have the powers under this legislation to also be inspectors for the purpose of the Health and Safety Reform Bill? Because that could have some positives and some negatives. It could change the nature of the relationship between the education institutions and those bodies, but that could be in a positive way and also in a negative way. And I want to give the Minister an example that was raised with me specifically today, and that is around school science labs and their use of chemicals. Because many schools at the moment use chemicals in their science labs, and the storage practices are quite variable. And the schools actually want to comply, but there isn't a heck of a lot of enforcement or a heck of a lot of advice given to schools on this. And I understand it's something that Aero used to inspect but no longer does. And so therefore, would the government envisage that being the sort of reason that Clause 181(1)(b) might actually come into force? So the Education Review Office has delegated the responsibility, for example, to actually be the health and safety inspectors. What? Sorry, sorry, I got that one, yeah, under 181(a). Oh yes, because they're a department, not a state service, I think. Yes, so would I think the Chair, would the government envisage that an Aero inspector, for example, would be given that power? Because schools want to comply, but I think we would all agree that there are some significant risks involved here around the use of, I mean, I've mentioned science labs and their use of chemicals. Other examples might be workshops within schools. You know, they have very dangerous machinery that they're using within workshops. And is that the sort of example that the government, Mr. Chair?
Chris Hipkins.
That the government might see being used here. Because I note as I go through, when we talk about the powers of entry and inspection, when we talk about the power to enter, to take samples and objects and other things, the power to deal with the cause of imminent danger, these are all powers that very much suggest that the inspectors are dealing with a case where things are already wrong and there are things that we want to stop, or things that may even result in, you know, negligence or cases of prosecution, for example. But what happens where the organisation concerned, so in this case a school, wants to actually comply, wants some proactive advice, how does the government envisage that part, that would be given effect by the inspectorate? Or, in fact, do they not see the role of the inspectors doing that at all? So I guess those are my questions to the Minister. I'll be interested in his answers in due course.